Minkah Fitzpatrick talked about playing Minkah ball. What does that mean for the Steelers defense? And how has Omar Khan, I think, tailored this entire defense around the possibility of playing Minkah ball? We talk about that today on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Jenna Harner. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And we are happy to be rejoined here by Jenna Harner from Channel 11 WPXI. Jenna, it's so great to have you back. How you been?
I am so glad to be here. Happy Friday. I'm trying to think. I don't know what day it is. This is just normal, par for the course at this point. But happy to be back. Happy to be here. OTAs are done, which feels crazy. And now we move into not rookie minicamp, team minicamp, mandatory team minicamp. All the camps are, everything.
They blur together. They blur together. It's going to be crazy. And plus, next year they're talking about even using rookie camp to ramp up the OTAs, to ramp up the training camp and take away the break that we even have during that. That's another story. We won't get into all of that. But Jenna, I wanted to talk to you today about Minkah Fitzpatrick because we've been trying to talk to him all OTAs. He hadn't been available. And then we got about 5 minutes with him. And I played some of his clips on our yesterday show talking about the Cameron Sutton signing and what he thinks the team can do to help there and things like that. But I also wanted to just talk to Minkah Fitzpatrick about Minkah Fitzpatrick because this was a guy who led the NFL in interceptions 2 years ago with 6 picks, and he's done it multiple times. He's been a first-team All-Pro guy and then didn't have any interceptions last year. And it was something we acknowledged. You talked about it. I talked about it all season long last year, is that he's having to play so many different roles last year compared to where he was in some of his better years. And because of that didn't allow him to kind of be himself. And when we got to asking him about it, this was how he responded at OTAs. Are there things that you feel like your defense can do more to put you in a better position to be a turnover creator? You led the league in interceptions some years, you didn't have any last year.
Just let me play ball. That's it. Minkah ball.
You feel like you're in a better
scheme that allows that to be Minkah ball?
We got to figure it out. Look back at the 22 tape and see, what we did then.
Why do you view it important to be here? You've been here since the first day of OTAs and before that. Where some other veterans have come in and out.
I think it's important when you have a lot of new faces in the building. And I think this year we had a lot of new faces, not just players but staff. And you want to start forming the relationships early. You want to make sure everybody's on the same page early. Because if I came in now and they were teaching stuff that wasn't exactly what I was taught, it would be, we playing catch up. I'm not big on doing that. I like everybody being on the same page and on one accord.
When you look at the roster around you, is this roster, especially secondary, in a better position maybe now with depth to also help you play Minkah ball?
Yeah, I think, we have a lot of talent. We have a lot of experience. We have a lot of guys that, can do different things. And, I think if the goal is to put the best players in the best position, then I think we have the right roster for it.
With the caveat, obviously, that this is OTAs, how do you feel as a secondary you guys have gelled up to this point?
I think we did a lot of good things, and there's a lot of things that we gotta work on. It's still early on. We're only on our 7th or 8th practice, something like that. But I think the more time we spend together, the better we'll gel.
What does a guy like Patrick mean for the whole defense as far as adding to the flexibility from the linebackers?
He's a guy that he flies around. He plays sideline to sideline. He plays with a lot of passion, a lot of energy. He's a high IQ guy, and I think just adding a guy like that in a linebacker room is something that we need, and something that is going to be very valuable this upcoming season.
Is that something that can help with Minkah ball?
As many great players as we could get in the field is going to help Minkah play Minkah. I'm sorry, I keep beating up your mic. My bad.
Outside of Minkah Fitzpatrick assaulting the Channel 11 mic for half the interview, which was
It happened
funny.
like 4 times.
It was so funny. Yeah, it just like in that clip, you saw it happen there, and he was like, okay, I'm sorry, I just keep bumping into this thing. But Jenna, what was your reaction when you heard? I mean, you were standing right there when he talked about, he used the phrase Minkah Ball. It sounded like it was like a brand he was promoting.
Yeah, and it sounds like he knows he's going to be able to get back to his roots and get back to what makes him so successful and get back to not carrying every responsibility in that secondary, or at least what it felt like, because so much of last season felt like it rested on the shoulders of Joey Porter Jr. and on Minkah Fitzpatrick, whereas now there are so many pieces in place for him to be able to do what he does best, where he is going to be able to fly around in the way that he does, and he's going to be able to make those plays almost kind of like that center fielder type of player out there, where he's able to, okay, I know where this ball's going, I'm going to pick this pass off. Because again, last year felt like such an anomaly. Last year was, okay, he's not making the plays that we're used to seeing him making because there's so much on his plate right now in terms of what he's asked to be able to do. And granted, that was a lot of injury based. That was just a lot of need based on what the Steelers did and didn't have in some of those positions in their secondary. But this year, as of right now, it seems they seem a lot more apt for him to be able to get back to the way that I think Steelers fans have seen him play since they traded for him back in 2019.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say 18-19, back in 2019.
No, I feel you. I think that's very much what's going on there. And you look at how, things have kind of worked for Minkah Fitzpatrick. Again, this is a guy who I think people still say is, the best safety in football. And because of what he's bringing to the table. And I think people kind of recognize, one, he was dealing with injuries last year. And then two, I mean, the Steelers were down to practice squatters in several positions at several points of the year. But just an example of what we're talking about here with what he's being lining up, what you talked about there, is he had to play so many different positions. He wasn't just the free safety. This past year, he played 664 snaps. 270 of them came at free safety, about 149 of them came in the slot corner, 157 of them came in the box. So you're talking about basically 3 different positions where he lined up at least 150 times, 2 of those away from the free safety role. You go back just to, he was first team All-Pro, leading the NFL in interceptions. He played 1,006 snaps. 1,006 snaps, Chris, and 600. Yeah, we got it out. And then, but 640 of them were in the free safety role. So you're talking about last year he played less than a third of what of his time at free safety that he did 2 years ago. And I think that's what Minkah Ball is. It's allowing him to get there. And oh, by the way, the difference in those years, again, not just the 6 interceptions, but last year in 2023 was the first year of his NFL career that he gave up and allowed 100 a passer rating allowed for quarterbacks over 100. It never, though, the highest it been was 95 in his career. And in fact, the year before it was a 72.3, which is great when it comes to safety play. So again, it all comes back to having the resources on the defense to allow him to be the ranging free safety that he is. And that is Minkah Ball.
Yeah. And you could just see, again, I loved the way that he kind of said, I get to play ball. And then he kind of added his own little branding in there because he knows he's going to get back and just be able to do what he's so good at doing and also what he loves to do, the way he loves to play. And I think, I don't want to say last season was hard. And obviously, I mean, there were points that we talked with him last season where, he was alluding to it a little bit, but wasn't directly saying, I'm being tasked with a lot. I'm being asked to do a lot of different things. These guys are selfless in the way that they're just like, hey, wherever I need to be, wherever I'm asked to be, I'm going to be. But this feels like to me more of a situation where he's like, all right, I get to be back. I get back to playing my brand of football and get back to doing what I know I can be so successful at doing.
Absolutely. I want to talk more about how I really think there were several objectives for the Steelers to accomplish this offseason, but I think this was high up on Omar Khan's priority list. We'll talk more about that here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter with Jenna Harner. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is also sponsored by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. That's what brings home the winning trophy. And it's also what keeps your ride or die drive alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices that you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter here with Jenna Harner from Channel 11 WPXI. Jenna, my theory, I thought about this, and I think I might have even asked Omar Khan sort of this question about forming the defense a little bit more around Minkah Fitzpatrick. But you look more at the things that the Steelers did. Like, again, let's look at the snap counts that Minkah Fitzpatrick had this past season. He had, again, 270 at free safety. That's what you want. He played 23 snaps at the wide corner position, so outside corner. He played 149 in the slot, 157 in the box, 17 at the D-line, and 9 in the backfield. But basically, you look at that. I look at the box and the slot and the wide corners as the positions where you don't want him having to play it. He can play it, and he plays it well, but he doesn't play it elite. And it's better to have the master, the master of one trade and trying to be kind of average in all the others. But I look at that and I see, well, okay, let's look at what the Steelers did in this offseason. Well, for the slot corner, they just signed Cameron Sutton. That's one of the key roles right there, so that Minkah Fitzpatrick doesn't have to be that role. Wide corner, you went and got Donte Jackson in your trade with the Panthers, so now you've addressed that. But also, and in the box, that's where I think it's a combination of two guys, DeShon Elliott, Patrick Queen, and really three guys with Payton Wilson. But there you have the boxes where he's either helping out at linebacker, helping out at strong safety, and dime backer, all those roles there. So really, you have 5 different roles there that Minkah Fitzpatrick had to account for. And again, slot corner, outside corner, linebacker, and box safety, and dime backer. All those things are places where he's not able to just sit in the middle of the defense, play that robber zone that he does, and intercept passes that are going over the middle and be the key factor to intercept those passes. And also captain the defense, which is very much what he does from back there. To me, it smells like when you look at all those moves, again, Donte Jackson, Patrick Queen, Payton Wilson, DeShon Elliott, and now Cameron Sutton, all those moves to me look like, hey, let's get these good players who are good in their own right and are going to help this team. But they're also going to help this team let Minkah Fitzpatrick get back to being the best at what he does.
And that's what this defense wants to do, right? This is a team that builds everything on defense, knows their strength is defense, especially right now, and knows that the last handful of years, the defense has been what has carried this team, what has thrown this team on its back, wrapped itself around it, and dragged them into the playoffs, dragged everybody else along with them into the playoffs. But this did signal that to me. And the way that they filled these positions, yes, Patrick Queen is a guy that's going to be here, it feels like, for a long time. And he was such a solid addition there. But drafting a guy like Payton Wilson, who's going to be able to learn from a guy like Patrick Queen, bringing in DeShon Elliott, bringing in, these guys that fill these roles that the Steelers had holes in. And you clearly saw what those holes last year at those certain positions did and what they brought. Donte Jackson too. It took me a second to remember his name there, but it was really interesting. On Thursday after practice, I was speaking one-on-one with DeShon Elliott, and I just asked him, hey, how have you seen your role kind of evolve here since you've been with the Steelers on defense? Thinking, I just wanted a little bit of insight into where he is. And he's like, yeah, I'm really just, I'm here to let Minkah do Minkah can do what Minkah does best. And it was very candid, and I appreciate that so much from a guy like DeShon Elliott, but it's the truth. I mean, this is exactly what it feels like it is. He's just like, yeah, I'm here to kind of be the yin to his yang in that way and let him do what he does best. And I know my strengths and I know what I'm going to do.
It's so funny as a person who, has followed the Steelers for so many years. It sounds like where it sounds kind of like this, but also in a different dynamic, the dynamics between Troy Polamalu and Ryan Clark. Because Troy Polamalu was at his best doing the different thing that make it bad. Troy Polamalu wanted to line up everywhere, in the slot, at the linebacker, here, there, everywhere. His whole thing was you didn't know where he would be at any point in time. He could be jumping over the pile and tackling the quarterback as soon as he's snapping the ball. Like that, Troy Polamalu is a different human being when it comes to playing the safety position, which is why he's one of the greatest of all time. But what allowed him to do this, and he talked about this, and Ryan's whole thing was, I have to be the guy that fills this other safety role to allow him to be able to do that. Because if that other free safety role is a problem, if it's a liability, then Troy doesn't have the freedom to do this. And also, it was important for guys like Ike Taylor, Deshae Townsend, Bryant McFadden, James Ferrier, all those guys, them doing all their jobs so well allowed Troy Polamalu to be that X factor, who in his way, he did line up everywhere and he did go everywhere. And that was what made him special for that defense and why that Steelers defense was great and amazing and won 2 Super Bowls. But, you look at this time around, it's kind of the same thing. Is they need guys, whereas you don't want Minkah Fitzpatrick moving around the way Troy Polamalu did, because that's not his game. But you do want him to be able to play his role, and they need the support guys to do that. And I think they tried it with Keanu Neal last year as a box safety, didn't work out. Donte KZ still a good role guy, and we talked to Joey Porter Jr. and how important he is to the secondary, and even he was singing his praises as well. But you look at, again, the linebacker position, the reinforcements they've gotten there, the depth at cornerback that they've been able to bring in. All of that screams to me is that, again, you're getting Minkah Fitzpatrick so that you can say comfortably, Minkah, play that deep safety role, do whatever you want. And like sometimes I'd imagine Minkah Fitzpatrick, he is a guy that he studies the game so much. He studies film. Jenna, you see it at every practice when they finish when they finish the first team doing their team reps. Oftentimes, Minkah Fitzpatrick won't go off the field and drink water with like everyone else. He'll stand back like 20 yards with Terrell Austin, and they'll just look over the play and just be like, okay, can see this, can see that. And then that leads to adjustments that he makes in game. This is a guy who wants to think through football and play like he's always thought through football. And I think that's another reason why you want him back in that deep role where he can make those type of big plays.
And I think you touched on it a little bit too, but I think this defense is really starting to gel together. That was something I asked a lot of guys that we spoke with on the defensive side of the ball at the end of OTAs on Thursday. I was like, I know it's early. I know it's just, you've had, what is it? 9 practices up to this point, 9. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But how has this defense come together? And you heard Minkah say it, where he was like, I felt like it was really important for all of us, especially in the secondary, to be here, to be able to work together, to kind of be able to learn and just kind of get everything under their belt in terms of what goals they want to accomplish and what they want things to look like schematically. But you're also seeing kind of the relationships they're forming with each other. This seems to be a very close, cohesive unit that all knows their roles and knows their jobs and is very comfortable in those positions and is very comfortable saying, hey, look, I just have to focus on what I need to do. I don't have to do all of these other X, Y, Z things because, hey, this guy's filling a hole here because this guy's injured, or this guy's doing this and hasn't had that much experience. Like, this feels right now like a group that's just going to continue to gain a lot of cohesiveness, is going to continue to come together. And I think we're going to see that reflected on the field.
Absolutely. I think that's very much part of the plan here. And I think that's what can help the Steelers defense solve a lot of its problems from last year, is getting those turnovers. The Steelers defense, Mike Tomlin has always talked about splash plays, and they still ranked 6th in scoring, in overall scoring, which is where you want, but they ranked 8th in turnovers created. And this is a team where that's good. It's good to rank top 10 in turnovers, but I think they're at their best when they're creating those turnovers and they're limiting teams to what they're doing. As far as scoring in the red zone, where I think they were able to get a lot of stops. But when you look back at some of the years when the Steelers defense has been a major turnover creator, that's when they've been ranking at their best. You go back to 2020, they had the second most turnovers forced in the NFL. They ranked 3rd overall in both points allowed and yards allowed as a defense. You go back to 2019, they had the most turnovers they created that year. They ranked 5th in both points and yards allowed. It's about getting back to getting those turnovers. Minkah Fitzpatrick is being paid a lot of money to achieve that. He's a big part of the salary cap, which is why, again, this is the kind of focal point to make all that happen. So, Jenna, all that aside, minicamp is the next thing up for the Steelers. I want to talk to you about the other big points there because there's so many other taglines. In fact, some Steelers who returned to OTAs on Thursday. We'll talk about that here and more on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Jenna Harner, stick with us. We'll be right back. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Jenna Harner from Channel 11 WPXI. Jenna, one player that we saw at the very start of OTAs and then didn't see again was George Pickens. But then he was back at the end of OTAs on Thursday at practice and working with him. Justin Fields also talked about him, saying that, like, hey, like, I knew George Pickens before most of y'all knew George Pickens. So, like, there's their long-standing relationship. But I look at George Pickens and what's going on at the receiver position, and I'm very intrigued to see how the rest of how this mini camp lines up and what are the last things we see, because this is the last we will see this team until training camp, until they show up in Latrobe. They have a couple unpadded practices, and then they put the pads on, and then it gets live, and then we start seeing this physical offensive line. What are some of the things that you're looking at most next week when mini camp gets going?
Well, I'm going to be most intrigued, I should say, to hear from Najee Harris, just because we haven't spoken with him since we haven't spoken with him at all during OTAs. And players don't have to talk during OTAs. That's not a requirement, but minicamp, it is. And so I'm going to be very intrigued for us to hear a little bit of his thoughts on the Steelers not picking up his 5th-year contract, obviously. But I really want to get his thoughts and get his takes on this offense. We've kind of talked a little bit how Najee can be very candidly honest, which is something you really appreciate out of players. But now, aside from Najee's contract situation, obviously, and hearing about that, I'm really intrigued to see his thoughts on Arthur Smith's offense, what it's been like working with Arthur Smith up to this point, the relationship the two have developed, his feelings on just everything, because we haven't heard his takes on it. And again, we know how candidly honest in a good way it can be from Najee Harris. So I'm intrigued to hear that. Of course, the wide receiver position is just going to be one that I'm going to continue to keep a close eye on and just see how everything's shaking out, the reps, who's taking what, who's going where, who's lining up where. And I'm still excited to just continue to see the creativity that we've seen from this offense and just what they've been doing, what we've been seeing from them. Obviously, we've heard so much from especially the tight ends about their usage, but I'm just really excited to kind of see this offense continue to evolve.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's the other part of this is this team is still going to be built around trying to run the football in the offense and trying to build off of that. And again, it's not only running the football, but we need to see how this offense starts to come together. And I asked this of Broderick Jones, and again, I'll play this clip more on Monday or so when we're getting ready for OTAs. But I asked Broderick Jones if he felt like the offense has a little bit more stuff that's clicking for it right now, and he was like, "I'm not sure if it's that, but he's like, I do feel like we are a bit further along in understanding who we're supposed to be." And I think that's the whole thing that you want to see. Is it's tough to really discern that right now because you're just at such the early stages of the season. You're still dealing with OTAs, even at the early part of training camp. But I'm going to be really interested to see if we get to like early to mid-August. The pads have been on for about a couple weeks, and we're doing like the 10th day or the whatever day of 7 shots with pads on, and the offense and the defense are giving it to each other, and the offense is having some really big plays in different ways. How does that play out? And if they seem further along and more organized, I think that's going to go a long way for this offense. And a lot of it comes down to guys like Najee Harris fitting in with what they're trying to do. I think Najee Harris, he made it work without the offense really, I think, being shaped around him very well. The offensive line hadn't been very good until like the second half of last season. The quarterback situation has been a mess since Najee got here. The coordinator situation has been rough. But now you're looking to try to fix all of those in 1 year. And even if they're all not great, if they're all just decent, that could be the platform that allows him to be more of a playmaker, much like how we're talking about how, the Steelers defense needs to let Minkah play Minkah ball. Maybe the Steelers offense needs to let Najee play Najee ball, and we could see how they play there.
We can. And I think, again, you and I have talked about this a couple of times, and obviously you've shown interviews with certain players throughout OTAs, but this offense not only seems right now to have an identity and for guys to know what that identity is, but they also just have this feel of, we know what we're supposed to do. We know where we're supposed to be. We know what's expected of us. And yes, it's simple. You would think, of course, this is what I want out of an offense, but it feels like we haven't had that on this, since I've been covering this team for the last 4 years at this point. It feels like there hasn't been this much of a clear-cut direction of, hey, this is who we want to be as an offense. This is what we want to look like, and this is what we're going to do. And it really seems like that is such a big part of what this team is going to do this season. And yes, it's OTAs. Yes, it's early. They could go out on the field and things can happen. But I just feel like the way these players have been talking, this feels like there's a direction that they're all making sure they're moving in the same way.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot here to go over for the Steelers when it comes to the offensive direction. And again, defensively, I think that everyone's going to want to see the guys taking a step forward. I talked to Joey Porter Jr. Again, we'll have that clip on the Monday show when we got to talk to him there. But, he talked about Corey Trice and Darius Rush taking serious steps forward. And I think that's such a huge part of this conversation too, is having depth at corner and depth around the team, and especially on defense. We saw the injuries decimate this team, Jenna, and if the Steelers can find some guys who are able to fill those different roles coming off the bench, that could be huge for when you get mid to late season and you just need some tough games from some guys who've been ready coming off the bench.
Yeah, absolutely. And I haven't had the chance to talk to Corey Trice yet, but I'm so intrigued to get his perspective on everything. Obviously, we know how good he feels, how good he says he feels, when he's going to be ready, but what he sees his role kind of being, and also knowing, again, there's going to be a lot of interchangeable parts on this defense that I feel like you're going to see your key guys, but you're also going to see guys getting rotated in here and there in special situations, as well as, substitution wise, but having that depth, especially when injuries come calling, because it's the nature of the NFL. It's probably what's going to just happen. But having that security is going to be such a fantastic thing for this defense to stay as cohesive as possible throughout the duration of the season.
Absolutely. She's Jenna Harner of Channel 11 WPXI. Jenna, thanks so much for joining us. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Well, thank you for having me as always. It was such a pleasure to join you on Friday. You can find me on Twitter at Jenna Harner 11, Instagram Jenna_Harner, and locally here in Pittsburgh on WPXI Channel 11. If not, you can stream our app both on air and online.
Absolutely. She's Jenna Harner. I'm Chris Carter. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Find us on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes. We're back Monday getting you ready for mini camp here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.